everyone. My name is Kasabata and welcome to the Voices Rooted podcast. In studio today, I am joined by this gentleman. He's going to introduce himself to you. Please welcome.
Thank you. My name is Albert Barume. I'm a national of DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, and I'm the current United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Would you please just clarify, just tell us what your mandate is?
The Special Rapporteur is part of what is known as the special procedures. A special procedure are a sort of sub-organs of the Human Rights Council. Human Rights Council being the United Nations central bodies that is in charge of human rights. So it does appoint a pool of experts on different thematic on human rights. That, I would say they serve like technical advisors.
All right.
So that's what I'm part of.
All right, so I'm going to dive into my questions.
Please do.
So in your work, you've highlighted how Indigenous peoples are disproportionately affected by climate change. Do you see how the injustice plays out in different areas during your work? And if you do, what do you see and what do you suggest be done about those particular issues?
Yeah, Indigenous peoples, they don't say it is a fact. I've just came back from the COP30 in Berlin, where Indigenous people repeated the fact that they contribute very little to global warming.
Yeah.
Literally. I
Yes.
mean, almost, I'm not the expert in climate change. I'm a lawyer by training, so very little really in emission of gases. But yet, Indigenous people resources, lands are increasingly and will be increasingly targeted as a solution to climate change. And that is because, and not just climate change solution, but also for the preservation of biodiversity.
Yeah.
You know, a huge part of the remaining biodiversity are now located on Indigenous people's lands because they are actually good stewards, but also the whole paradigms of transition energy that is key to climate change. Certain studies are estimating between 40 to 50% of those potential are either on or near Indigenous people's land. So once more, they're going to be asked and their own resources to be at the center of solving the climate crisis.
That they didn't cause.
But this is a context where Indigenous people's rights in general and right over lands are scarcely protected. You have very few countries, let's say speak of Africa, very, very few countries that have actually recognized Indigenous peoples as landholders, as protected.
I'm from one of those countries that don't
recognize. It's a bit unfair. It's really a bit unfair to expect Indigenous people to play and contribute significantly to the solution of climate change when their basic fundamental rights remain unprotected.
All right, and then in terms of carbon markets and forced climate solutions, how do you view the role of the carbon offset schemes that are currently happening across different African regions?
Well, I'm not the expert, but let me put maybe in a blunt language. Carbon markets is business. We're talking about businesses around carbon. And we're talking about something that is likely to become also central to what is perceived as solution to climate change. So we're bringing in private sector, adding another layer of actors to come and operate on Indigenous people's land. These resources, these lands are already almost crowded.
Yes. They are.
You have to know that. On this land, you have protected areas, you have the traditional extractive industry, mining and whatever. And now you bring in other layers of operators. You call them carbon market, but we're talking about private businesses coming to sell the new commodity, which is carbon. So I think a human rights perspective is really to say that today businesses are bound to respect human rights. There is, the UN guiding principle on businesses and human rights that have moved away, have shifted toward, company taking responsibility. And I think that is a framework in which, those new actors, that new layer of businesses must operate. But in addition to that, I think it's really, really important and central that if that business, a new business, has to be operated near or on indigenous people's lands, they have to be grounded on those rights protected by indigenous people. In most countries, those rights of indigenous people are still not protected.
They are not, yes.
So bringing in those actors with big chunk of money, operating in a vacuum of legal framework, a total lack of legal framework protecting indigenous peoples. I was talking to some company recently in my capacity and really advising to see the risk, the operational risk to operate in a legal context with very little protection for indigenous people. Because they will be really walking into a minefield of social contestation with what it comes up with in terms of operational risk, reputational risk, and so on. So the advice is to those states, those private sector interested in the carbon market should also work for state and push state to have a legal framework that actually guarantee them to operate freely while respecting the rights, particularly of indigenous people.
All right, and then we see that with the climate crisis, there's a lot of disinformation that happens, especially online and as it pertains to indigenous communities. Do you come across it within your work? How do you think we should reframe the narrative of indigenous people so that they don't get waylaid by the misinformation and disinformation that surrounds climate justice, especially by big polluters and big tech?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, but let me say this. And speak specifically on Africa.
Yeah.
I am a special rapporteur covering the entire world, but on this, let me speak on Africa. I think it's really important to recognize that the continent, African continent, we're still lagging behind in terms of protecting indigenous peoples' rights.
Yes.
You still have states that will spend hours denying. There are actually in Africa community that use the concept indigenous peoples as a way to claim redress for historical injustice they have gone through. States still wrongly thinking those communities are claiming some special status or in exclusion of others, they want to be privileged. It's nothing to do with the privileged status. Indigenous people claim it's really a call for redress of those very unique violations that those communities have gone through. And unless I think African states, there is a couple of states that have made efforts.
Yes.
Yeah, but there's still very, very few in numbers. And unless the number grows, I think the whole climate discussion will put indigenous peoples in more jeopardy, particularly in the African context.
And then my last question is, you were saying you were at COP. I was also recently at COP, the COP of Truth, they called it.
Okay.
And there was a major shift on information integrity. And I do want to understand, do you think that there is a hope for information integrity? Do you think that's a possibility within the African context? Do you think any African countries would take up an information integrity declaration?
It's a really interesting question, and unfortunately, I'm not the expert on that, and I'll let you speak because I'm learning from you. Let me just say something. which might be related. It's the last report by the United Nations Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples that they presented to the Human Rights Council last September is on Indigenous people right to data. It is important for Indigenous people to have control over data regarding themselves, because it's part of their rights. It's part of a way for them to enjoy the right to self-determination. And information and data are becoming, or have become, part of what makes whichever entity become what they want to be. It's becoming critical, and it's for that reason I think there is no doubt that every legal entity, human or non-human, will need in the coming years to be in charge and control of their own data and information. And as is probably more relevant for Indigenous people, given that they have been marginalized for
a long time,
for years. So if the ordinary people, non-marginalized, are catching up on with information, with data, one can imagine,
the ones who've always previously been left behind,
of those who were historically left behind. So it's an important debate, and I'm not surprised that Indigenous people were engaged on that subject at the COP.
All right, so thank you very much for joining us. Do you have any last words for my viewers?
It's your viewers, I would say, I suppose you is an African audience, essentially.
Youth,
I would say youth. I would say our continent has something that it still need to grapple with in terms of fundamental human rights. And I'm talking here about a very limited number of communities, traditional communities, whose way of life, way of using of land and resources had been for decades denigrated, considered certain extent as savage, and we don't want to be associated. We see those communities as people that should abandon their way of life and become looking modern as we all want to look like. That's an injustice, because people don't choose who they are culturally. Those are mostly hunter-gatherers and nomadic pastoralists. Nobody chose to be born hunter-gatherers of pastoralists or nomadic pastoralists, and therefore nobody should be paying a heavy price of being denigrated or culture being seen as savage because of what they are by nature. It's an injustice that, as a special rapporteur on the rights of Indigenous people, I'm really calling upon African states to correct, and let me count on the youth to hear me up and to take this, because a continent that excludes, that dehumanizes, that pushes others to abandon their culture is unfair. It's a human rights issue, and it's one of those that Africa still has to address. So that would be a bit long message, but that would be my message to the youth. Thank you.
Thank you very much.